tout le monde. Bienvenue sur notre segment de Kozelegal avec Maître Béatrice Cazot. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Kozelegal avec Maître Béatrice Cazot with attorney Beatrice Cazot. We're excited today because we're going to talk about a subject that's very important, especially if you are a small business owner. So we hope that you're able to tune in. We hope that you're able to share the live, and if you have any comments, you can write it down below in the comment section. Si vous branchez avec nous, nous très contents parce que nous gagnons un sujet qui est très intéressant, et spécialement si que vous êtes un small business owner, et nous devons ça que share live là, et si vous avez un commentaire, écrivez en bas comment section là. Today we have our invited guest, a longtime friend and attorney extraordinaire. It is Mr. Hans Ottinot, who is a former city of attorney for the city of North Miami, city of Miami Gardens, and city of Sunny Isles. And most recently, he was a big time attorney for a major real estate investment firm right here in South Florida. So we're excited to have him because he is about to share so much with us, things that we need to know, especially, those of us who are small business owners who are dealing with commercial leases and, other stuff that we need to know, should know. So we're happy to have him. Hans, thank you for being here today. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And so I'm giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself for those people who don't know who you are.
Well, merci un peu, Beatrice. Thank you for the invitation. Hello to your listeners. I'm happy to be here. You have been a longtime friend. And also, from my standpoint, I grew up in this community. I went to Miami Edison Senior High. I was raised in the Lower Haiti Liberty City section of Miami. I practiced law for over 25 years. I've been heavily involved in so many different aspects of our community. And also, I was president of the Haitian Law Association, like you, Beatrice. Very
right.
important, avocat haïtien. So my goal today is to continue what I've been doing over the past 30 years, is to inform the community so they can make better decisions, especially with respect to entering commercial leases in the future, or currently looking at their lease to make sure they're protected going forward. So I have that experience, and also hopefully I will be able to enlighten our listeners so they could go forward and know the best practice in dealing with landlords.
We appreciate it because we know that there's major pitfalls. When you don't know, you basically take the necessary steps to create a corporation, and you basically find an office location, and now you're presented with a commercial lease. Here, sign here. So let's talk about that. So if someone basically goes through the necessary process of creating a corporation, now they are about to rent a commercial office space. Now let's talk about the leasing process. Do they sign as the lease as individual or as a corporation?
Well, one of the major pitfalls that I have seen over the years, and not to advocate for my law firm, that I have seen so many small business owners entering the negotiation with landlords without any attorney, without any counsel, and accept this boilerplate lease that the landlord provide to the small business owner and ask you to execute it. And your question is so important. So, and I have seen one of the major mistakes that most tenants have committed over the years is basically executing the lease individually, not creating a corporation that basically will be a shield to liability. So when you execute that lease as an individual, that means you are personally liable for the rent obligation, any other obligation in that lease. So it is important, if that small business owner decides, well, look, I have this great idea. I want to start this business. It could be obviously, a clothing store or a restaurant. Especially in our community, you have so many of us want to create a restaurant, and there's all type of pitfalls with entering a lease with respect to a restaurant. So the first thing you should do is create a corporation to protect your personal assets from liability. Because if you don't do that, if you're unable to pay the rent, and sometimes this pandemic has impacted so many small businesses. So many small businesses are unable to pay the rent. I'm going to tell you, landlords generally are not sympathetic individuals or corporations.
Correct.
They want the rent. You sign the lease, and the lease basically say you have to pay this rent on the first of the month. Obviously, some of them will, in light of the pandemic, will negotiate some rent deferment, some rent abatement, but nevertheless, they will not give you a carte blanche that you don't have to pay your rent. So, right when you want to enter that lease, you need to basically make that important decision. It's not going to be in my name because it's going to be in a corporation. If you don't know how to form a corporation, there's services that can help you, and there's lawyers that can help you to form that corporation.
In fact, when I started with my conversation with you, I started off assuming that if somebody's going to start a business, that the first thing they do is actually go through the process of creating a corporation. So I'm glad you went through, that people are actually going and renting out office space to start the business, but they never actually gone through the whole process of making it legal.
Correct.
Right? In creating a corporation. I think that's the first step. The first step is, you have such a great idea, is to actually put everything down in paper and formalize it, and create that shield, that corporation to protect you, as an individual. So I'm glad you covered that.
Yeah, you and I both are lawyers. We understand the process.
That's the first thing.
but Beaches, many people, they gun ho. They have a great idea. They don't want to work for someone else. They finally got a certain amount of money. They want to make it happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so they are not looking at all the issues that basically they will face when they decide to start this business. And especially if they're going to look, most business, both of us are business owners now. Your rent is 50% of your overhead.
Correct.
So you have to take your time and really either you could seek counsel of another experienced business person, or you can talk to an attorney. You could say, look, you got this lease. Let's make sure that you're protected, because some things may happen that's outside your control. You may not get the revenues that you expected. And one of the things that I always tell anyone, look, if you decide to open a business, make sure you set aside at least 1 year worth of rent. 1 year, and you're going to have to, you generally give a security deposit, which sometimes is 2 months, or it depends on what the landlord wants. But you need to make sure that you set aside, if you can set aside 2 years, that's great, because most of the time, if you're a new business, your revenues, it will take a year
It's going to take some time. It's going to take it from people who've been doing it. It's going to take some time. And in fact, I'm thinking that we probably should have had this prior to COVID, because I think a lot of people have learned what you're saying now is that, I should probably have saved up, enough money to cover me, because we're going on, month 8?
Correct.
Dealing with COVID-19. And for the most part, small business owners who are, basically on a lease, they're not getting,
Correct.
You understand, like you said, landlords, they just want to get paid. whether COVID or not, whether or not you have clients walking through those doors or not, at the end of the day, beginning of the month, however it is that you pay, you make your payments, they're expecting their payment.
Correct.
And so, as you were talking, I want to bring you back because some people don't even realize that, like they can negotiate. What do you mean? I can negotiate my lease, my terms and agreement, and conditions. Talk about that.
Well, that's one thing a number of small business owners seems to forget, that they have leverage. An empty space to a landlord is a bad space. So when they see a potential tenant, they obviously going to negotiate from their standpoint, but they also would allow you to negotiate if you take the time and say, look, let's take for example the rent for a potential space. The landlord will basically give you his first offer.
Mm-hmm.
I want $5,000 a month, and that's it.
Right.
That's his initial offer.
Mm-hmm.
But most tenants might say, well, I accept it, without even making a counter,
Right.
without even saying anything, because the tenant could say, well, this space, I've been around here for about 6-7 months. This space been empty for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now I could only afford $3,000 a month. And trust me, if that space been vacant for a long time, that landlord will accept that rent. And second, there's something called additional rent. They call it common area expense.
Right.
And generally, most leases, especially with these commercial or triple net lease, which they include everything, every expense is passed through to the tenants.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, that's another area that the landlord, look, first you're going to have to pay him the base rent, which is generally $3,000 or $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And now that common area additional rent could end up being the same amount as the base rent.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have to pay additional $3,000 of making a total of $6,000. So that's another area you can negotiate, because there's certain common area expense that you shouldn't be responsible for. There's certain things you can say, look, I'm willing to pay it, but I'm willing to pay a fixed amount. Those things you can negotiate, but you have to understand how to negotiate. You have to have help to negotiate. I'm not saying you got to go hire an attorney, but there's other businesses who's been tenants for a long time can tell you, hey, you should ask for this. You should get a cap on your common area expense. Mm-hmm. So you have leverage. Do not accept the fact you don't have leverage, mm-hmm. because when you sign that lease has so many provision mm-hmm. that may favor the landlord, then it would be too late. At the time you realize, oh my God, I agree to this.
Right.
The landlord would say, yes, you did.
You want to see your signature again?
Yes, you did. There's so many issues, that you can negotiate up front. Up front, you negotiate it. You may have a timeline to open your business. One of the areas that, especially restaurants and other businesses, so you can't just open even a law office. You can't just open a restaurant business and you say, I got this idea today, I'm going to open it tomorrow.
Right.
No, you have to go through a permitting process.
Correct.
You have to get, maybe you want to do renovations, mm-hmm. interior renovation. Mm-hmm. And as a restaurant, you have to obtain certain permits from the county. Mm-hmm. That may take 6 months.
Oh, I'm so happy you brought that up.
That may be just now, for 6 months, you're not making any money.
So if you did not negotiate that in your contract,
correct,
that it is, that you have that leverage, that you're going to take time to apply for the permit, because you may think that you're going to be able to do business in that area.
Correct.
And then code enforcement says, hold up.
Well, you should know that.
Because for those of you who may not know, I am, magistrate for, one of the cities here. And so a lot of these cases do come before me. And like I said, Hans is like, former city attorney for so many different cities in South Florida. So he is so well versed. in code enforcement and code violations. Some of the he wrote some of the
codes.
some of the codes
And different
so
municipalities.
yes.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is very true. I've seen doctors,
Yes. Doctor's office.
therapists,
Correct.
chiropractors.
Correct.
Yes, you
Correct.
guys run into this a lot
Correct.
in the sense that you find a prime location,
Yes.
great location.
Correct.
You understand, and you rush into signing that lease, not making any provision that it's in
Basically, provision to ensure that you're able to go through the permanent process.
Exactly.
And that rent commencement doesn't start until your first day of opening the business.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
And so basically, one of the issues that, Beatrice, you can negotiate. Let's use the doctors, the chiropractor. You can negotiate with the landlord and say, you know what? I have maybe $20,000 of renovation that I need to open. Right. If you want me to be your tenant, I need you to give that as a tenant improvement. Mm-hmm. I need you to either give me a rent reduction for $20,000.
That's right.
Or you can give me the cash.
That's
you
right.
choose. So there's so many, because when that landlord say, well, you're going to be a 5 to 10 year tenant and you're going to pay good rent, he's willing to make that investment.
Correct.
A lot of potential small business owners don't realize
They don't realize that.
Yeah.
And I just remember there was one particular doctor who basically had an issue with the landlord because the city is requiring, of course, if you're going to be a doctor's
Correct.
office, you need to be ADA compliant.
Correct.
You understand? And now they signed this contract and they're telling the landlord, this is your building. Mm-hmm. You need to fix this, you need to fix that. And the landlord is like, no, it's your responsibility if you want to stay here and
Correct.
open up. And so that's a big issue. That's a major issue. I think Flock was telling us that we have questions.
Sure.
Okay, so I need to go.
I'll come back and address that
Yes.
ADA issue
Yes.
when we come back.
Okay. Which question? Okay, what if I owned a business and run it home, like a detached garage, and if I had to rent the detached garage, I would do so at the price I want to charge the business. Okay, let me reread that again. Okay. Because I don't know if we're talking about commercial leases here. It sounds like somebody's saying that they're using their residential home, the detached garage in his residential home.
And that brings a lot of
that's a whole other issue, Mr. Sherry. Yeah, that's a whole other issue. There's another one. A lot of small business owners in our community do not really educate themselves. They just try to do what might be in their best interest without consult an attorney. Well, yes and no. I don't know if it's necessarily in their best interest, because if you already signed the lease, then you're stuck. Is that correct?
Yeah, but
to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, most landlords, the lease is usually 3 to 5 years. You always have an opportunity to correct the mistakes. Mm-hmm. So if you made a mistake by signing a lease without doing the adequate research, without consulting an attorney, mm-hmm. but I can tell you, this is I'm here to give advice, but I can tell you, if a potential small business owner consult an attorney, the money they think they will save themselves significant
I say that all the time.
Significant dollars.
If you guys were to listen to me, the pitfall you would not fall into, because I have said this a lot. I think sometimes, they're thinking that, I have to pay an attorney to review this contract. I have to consult with an attorney over this. Imagine, you understand? Imagine the pitfalls, the headache. You understand? You would save yourself a world of hurt and trouble if you actually took the time, you understand, and spent that little consultation money and meet with an attorney to go over certain contracts before you sign it. So, the person who said that they're trying to do what's in their best interest, what's in your best interest is trying to get it right, do it right correctly the first time. And that's what we're talking about. And you mentioned the part about long-term leases. And so for our listeners, let's talk about that, because I know that some people are concerned, they're thinking, it's best that we go year to year. As a business owner, because I believe in stability, I usually go for long-term leases. You understand? Because it's just too much trouble for me to have to think about moving from one place to another. Like, we've been here for over 15 years. You understand? The same area for over 15 years. But some people may not feel that comfort level. Well, you understand? So what is your take? What do you think about that?
You have to understand your business well. If you're a restaurant, your law office, your doctor office, you need to understand, especially as a restaurant, location. Law office, when your client get used to coming to a certain location, they expect you to be there not just 1 year.
Yeah.
Even especially a restaurant. So you know that if you're going into business, you know you have to be there to establish a customer base, to establish foot traffic, especially restaurants or clothing store, anything that's retail, even a doctor office. So you want to enter into a lease that give you opportunity to establish a customer base, visibility. 1 year is not enough, because 1 year, and the worst thing you could do is enter that 1 year lease. Now, you open yourself to renegotiation with the landlord.
Correct.
He can raise his rent to, okay, you know what, I gave you $1,500 the first year. I noticed a lot of people been coming in here. You're doing well.
You're doing well.
I'm going to raise that rent to $5,000. And you have no choice, because now your customers are used to coming here, and you have no leverage, and he can do that. But if you enter into the 3 to 5 year lease, what I always suggest, enter into a 3 to 5 year lease, but I always ask for one option. One 3 year or one 5 year option that you can basically make that decision after 3 years. If I'm not making any money, I'm not successful, either I exercise the option or don't exercise that option. So that term need to be where you can establish, look, I don't know any business that from day one they're making a lot of money.
More money, right.
So you need to negotiate a lease that give you that opportunity. Also, if you negotiate a 3 year lease, the rent is fixed, the cost is fixed. Now, you, from a business planning standpoint, you know how much you pay in the next 3 years for rent.
That's awesome.
The landlord cannot change it.
That's amazing.
He generally will have some escalator from year to year that your rent go up 3%. Maybe not. You can negotiate a fixed rent for 3 years. Depends how much the landlord wanted to have you as a tenant. So a 3 to 5 year lease with a 5 year, 1 or 2 options that allow you to continue. If you don't want to continue, you can give notice to the landlord and say, hey, after 3 years, business wasn't successful, I'm moving on. But sometimes, look, we got to understand the community we are in. Sometimes it could be a restaurant, they really don't have the capital. They really want to enter into a 1 year lease, okay? But they can do it, Beach. But they want, give me that 1 year, but give me a 1 year, another option. Give me a 1 year option. So now that means you really got 2 years, because you can exercise that option to give you that extra year versus, but at either the same rent or maybe a rent with a increase, slight increase. So at least it's your choice.
Correct.
It's not the landlord saying, hey, that 1 year, here's the new lease, take it or leave it.
Right.
Because he's watched, most landlords will watch the tenant performance.
Right.
They know, trust me, they know which tenant will not survive and which tenant that will survive. And so to go back to the point, of creating a corporation, and one of the other mistakes that a lot of small business make, even though they create the corporation, the landlord, because especially in our community, most of the new business are not well capitalized. They don't have a line of credit with banks. Oh, they won't get one. So the issue always, the landlord say, well, we need protection. your corporation has no assets, so we need you to execute a personal guarantee that you're going to be responsible for this lease obligation if the corporation is not able to. And to me, that's another pitfall. Another pitfall because now, if you default and don't pay rent, the landlord, you might have a nice Mercedes Benz, a nice BMW, a nice Toyota, and or even something that is not, if it's non-homestead property, they can go after that property.
Right.
Okay. So what I generally will tell a small business owner, look, personal guarantees are not required by well-known retailers. You know, the Publix,
The Target,
the
the
Targets,
Walmarts of
but
the world.
even but landlords make some exceptions. But I would say, look, I can understand the landlord concern, but what you want to do is have a personal guarantee that maybe a 1 year personal guarantee or 2 years. Look, I showed a track record of paying rent. So because of this track record, this personal guarantee need to be released. So that's something that most tenants don't
know.
They just sign it for life
Right.
of the lease. You know, you get a 5 year or 10 year lease. If you default the second year of that lease and you have a personal guarantee, let's say the yearly rent is $100,000. Now, if you default the second year or the next 3 years of rent is your obligation. That's $300,000.
Yeah.
So, what I would tell any tenant, look at these issues of personal guarantee and say, look, I can understand your concern initially. I'm willing to give one, but I want to negotiate that eventually get a release of it if I show good performance after a certain amount of years. So that's a very important issue because, look, if you're in business, you never want your personal assets subject to litigation.
Yeah.
And that's something that small business. Another area, you know, is property maintenance.
Yes. Who's responsible?
Oh, well, look, again, most of these boilerplate lease, look, I'm an attorney, you read them. The language give me headaches when I read them, but I have to read them and get an understanding, so I can understand why a lay person do not understand some of the language. They are made that way for a reason. They're not made for you to understand.
Nope.
There's legalese, you know, you have to have
just gloss over it.
yeah, and sign. and next thing you know, oh, the AC is not working. Let me call the landlord. Oh, landlord, why are you calling me? That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Did you look at your lease? The lease say the AC is your responsibility.
That's crazy.
So generally, here's the general rule. In most lease that I have seen, that anything generally interior, is the tenant responsibility. Exterior, the roof, is generally the landlord responsibility. But sometimes problems on the exterior may cause internal problems.
Correct.
So you can get the landlord on those issues, but maintenance issues always rise up,
Yeah.
always happen in commercial leasing transaction. So you have to read it. You have to understand what's your responsibility, what's the landlord's responsibility. You have to negotiate it early. Don't sign off on a lease that basically put everything on you.
Right.
And you might be responsible for fixing the exterior and you don't even know it.
If you don't read it.
Okay?
If you don't read.
So I would tell any small business owner, look, you know, don't rush. Take your time. If you can't afford an attorney, you know, find a way. You know, I'm not advocating for you to go hire, but I would always say, look, research, talk to tenants who's been through this experience, talk to other small business owners, because experience is the best teacher. They will tell you the pitfalls to look for. And look, I have counseled so many people. You know, I've been on the landlord side. I have given advice to people on the tenant side, and I always tell them, look, the landlord will always look out for the landlord interest.
Yes.
And that's fine, but you have to look out for your interest.
Your own best interest
So,
as well.
so there's so many different pitfalls in commercial leasing that you have to pay attention to, because at the end of the day, when you're a small business, any increase in your rent can derail your business.
I agree.
The pandemic, take for example, Beatrice, the pandemic has impacted businesses in the black community, the Haitian community more than that. We didn't set up our businesses, and Congress failed small businesses and minority. We didn't set up our businesses with employees. As you know, most of these small restaurants, they pay people as consultants. They don't have a payroll. So when the PPP loans were provided, most of these businesses were not eligible.
Correct.
They didn't have any employees.
Yeah.
So then, you're not eligible to get the help that the government says is supposed to help you.
And because of your setup.
Yeah.
It's the way you.
That's a different issue, different topic that small business owners should figure out. Look, obviously Congress, again, it's not our people who are looking, understand. They didn't go to any of these little Haitian restaurants and understand the dynamics of how it's set up, because they're not looking at it from this. They're looking at it from a standpoint of corporate America.
Right.
So those issues, but you didn't get the PPP loan. Now the landlord is calling you every day.
Yep. For
payment. The first of the month has passed. I need my rent. And so what do? Do not ignore the call.
Right.
Take the call. And what you have to do is say, look, the landlord know what's out there. They know the pandemic has impacted everybody. They know the government has shut down during the early part of the pandemic certain businesses, especially restaurants. Yeah. And they know right now restaurants are not permitted to operate in full capacity. Correct. So what you have to do is say, look, I'm not making the same money that I made prior to the pandemic, but I'm willing to pay something. I'm willing to work with you. You need to give me some kind of rent reduction, rent abatement, or something that I can survive. Most landlords may agree to that. Some may not, because they may have another tenant sitting on the side to take your place. But most of the time, if you take that call, the worst thing you can do is not take that call.
To ignore it, because sometimes people think that if they ignore it, it'll go away.
No,
that's not how it works.
They get a 3-day notice of eviction.
That's right.
Okay, if they don't return the calls, they don't try to work with the landlord.
Right.
They will get a nice 3-day notice.
Right.
Say pay rent or vacate the premises. So.
There is something that I wanted to talk to you about in terms of, for business owners. Do you advise for them to get liability insurance?
Well, great question. Great question. And the answer is yes. Typically, most lease is a requirement of the lease that you obtain liability insurance. So if you don't have that insurance and your lease requires it, you are in breach of the lease. So landlord could file action to get you evicted based on the default, because that liability insurance is not only for your protection, but it's also to protect the landlord. Because when the tenant doesn't have the liability insurance, guess who the PI attorney is going after?
Yes.
The landlord. So generally, if you listen to us now, look at your lease, and if you don't have the insurance or you didn't provide it to the landlord, please provide it. Because again, what landlords generally do, the day you become a pain as a small business, okay?
They go back to and they look at your contract again.
Yeah.
And see where can they get you.
Oh, it's been 2-3 years. We never got your insurance certificate.
Right.
Can you give us I don't have. Well, you need to give us. Well, you got 30 days to give us this insurance certificate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you don't give it, we file an action in court to kick you out.
Yes.
So look at your lease. Any requirement, make sure that you're in compliance.
Yeah.
Because that avoid any argument. one of the things
That also come into remind me just in
Mhm.
terms of the city and the county
Yeah.
to make sure that you have your occupational
Correct,
licenses in
correct,
order as
correct.
well.
And that's you working with the landlord, because most municipalities or the county, they're going to want the landlord to sign off on these occupational license. And so you have to go through all this process to make sure you are compliant with the lease, make sure you comply. In fact, there's a provision in most lease that basically require the tenant to comply with the law.
Right.
So the law means having the certificate of occupancy, having the business license also. So one of the issues that I wanted you to know is the fact that tenants, when they get in trouble, with the landlord, they generally, you know, want don't want to have a sit down with the landlord, because the landlord probably, they don't like me. No, that's your right.
Right.
Call the landlord and say, can we sit down and let's see what we can negotiate. So communication is very important.
It's
Very
key.
important to have a good relationship throughout your lease term. So, my suggestion, look, even if you're in a lease now, if there's issues that you're dealing with, find help. You're not by yourself. A lot of tenants are dealing with it. Attorneys can help you, or another tenant who has experienced similar situation can help you. So don't sit there and just let the problem persist and become more of a headache to you. So we're here. This is what I do. I do a lot, as you know.
Yes, you do.
But I feel knowing the pain and knowing the headache that our community have gone through to open a small business.
Oh my God.
Some of them taking their own life savings, putting it into the business,
Yes.
and then not knowing the legal aspect of a lease, allowing themselves to fall into traps in terms of dealing with landlords.
And to possibly lose everything.
Yes.
Use all your resources, your investments. Sometimes all it requires is that you do your due diligence and
correct.
make sure that you review these contracts, or have somebody, an attorney preferably, review the contracts, make sure that you're familiar with the terms, make sure you're familiar with the, with the agreement, the conditions, etc. Because, go ahead.
I want to give you a good example, Beatrice, especially our community, and especially with restaurants and other businesses. Sometimes our small business owners in our community somebody want to purchase an existing business.
Right.
Okay? And on the outside, the business is doing well. You could see customers coming in. You could see you might get a great balance sheet to see that they're making a nice profit. But one of the things I could tell you, somebody had called me. I'm just telling you, I was shocked. Hey, I got big money to buy a business, and I'm ready to go yesterday. You know what was my first question? Did you talk to the landlord and see if you can basically assume the lease? Did you figure that out yet? Before you spend any money on buying the business, go have that conversation first with the tenant to see if the tenant, and you need to be in that conversation, and see if the tenant and the landlord had a discussion about basically assigning the lease to you. After that conversation, the deal was dead. The landlord did not agree to sign the lease. Little things like that, he could have been out a big amount of money.
Oh my.
A big amount of money.
Oh my.
But having that conversation. But luckily, that small business owner, we were friends. Called me and said, look, first thing you need to do, especially when you assuming a lease, you need to get that consent. Trust me, I have seen this.
Yes.
You need to get landlord consent.
I think you probably saved some people a world of headache.
Yeah.
And just that one statement. If you learn nothing else.
Yeah. But again, another pitfall. Okay, I got this big office, let's say a doctor office. Initially I thought I was going to use all of it, but I only need half. Now, I want to sublease the other part. Again, I got a good friend who's a doctor. Let me bring him in, sign the sublease, and landlord doing his usual inspection. Who's this? Oh, this is so-and-so, my sublessee. Landlord said, did you read your lease? Don't you need the landlord consent to sublease the premise? Oh! Wow. Another issue. A lot of tenants find themselves in trouble. Not reading a simple clause, assignment, of the lease. And subleasing.
Yep.
And you need the landlord consent.
Correct.
You cannot just enter into a sublease without landlord consent.
Correct.
And I'm going to tell you another area, especially with restaurants, and I'm going to tell you in our community, they generally open a restaurant, renovate it, put nice fixtures, nice equipment, and let's say restaurant doing okay, then the tenant said, wow, I need to go out and get a loan because I need money to pay, certain overheads and everything else. And the tenant goes to a bank and the tenant say, well, let me use my restaurant equipment as collateral for the loan. Now, again, most lease that dealing with restaurant, they call these UCC loans. You're familiar with, and you are prohibited from using your restaurant equipment as collateral for a loan. So, if you enter into that loan agreement, you are in breach of the lease. And most small business owners don't know. I paid for this equipment, or well, you didn't read that lease. Yeah. It became a fixture, especially if it's attached to the wall, and they need equipment in there. Look, listen. Were you going to argue in court of law when the judge probably never been to your restaurant? All the judge going, let me see that lease. Let me see that lease. At least say you can't do it.
Right.
So those issues are so numerous, with respect to small business owner, not really reading the fine print, and understanding their rights and obligation, and the landlord rights and obligation. So, but more importantly, you can save yourself a major headache and save money by upfront finding good counsel to give you advice on these issues.
Correct.
And
if you're, to me, it's like if you're going to, because it's a big expense, it's a major, expense, and if you're willing to do that, you understand what's. It doesn't hurt you to make sure that when you're going to go in, you do it the right way.
Correct.
Right? And then you seek the advice ahead of time as opposed to towards the tail end, right? Or when the problem, when it becomes a problem for you, and that's when you're going to seek counsel. I know that, especially in our community, sometimes they look at lawyers as, we're only there to solve problems. They don't understand that we're actually there to prevent some of it.
Preventive law. because we all are better off if we can prevent the problem. Because if the problem arises, you're gonna have to. It's gonna be
more expensive to undo. Fix the problem than it is to basically help you prevent the pitfalls to begin with. Yeah. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. I think that you have given us a lot of gems, a lot of information, especially for our small business owners out there who are, some of them put their entire, life savings. You understand? Yeah. Some of them take out their retirement funds to be able to open that small business, to be able start that restaurant, whatever it may be. And so I hope that, those of you who have tuned in, you actually learned something today, and whatever you learn, you're able to pass it on to other business owners so that they know and understand. Obviously, we limited our show today. We're limited to commercial leases, but there's so much more that we could have talked about, we could have touched on today, because Huns have been doing this for over 25 years, working on the government side, working on the landlord side. So we're getting it from all angles from him. So we appreciate that. And if you have a final word, what would you like to share with us? And definitely share your information so that people who have questions, people who want to retain counsel, they can reach out to you.
First of all, Beatrice, thank you for the invitation. I want to thank all the listeners for listening to us. As someone who has patronized small business in this community for so many years, in fact, my kids think I'm crazy because I said, look, I used to say every week we're going to go eat at a small business, because you know what? If we don't support them, they don't have a way to bring that money home to feed their kids.
That's right.
So this mission that I'm on now is to basically help these small businesses understand the dynamics of their lease, that they can protect themselves even more. And if a problem arises, they can also, here's help to fix the problem for you. So, my law office number is 954-254-8054, 954-254-8054. You can call me anytime, and I will return the call, especially the small business owner. It's very tough now. This pandemic has impacted the small business more than anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone. So at this point, if you in trouble with your landlord, sometimes it's communication, talking to the landlord, especially if you've been a good tenant for a long time.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You've been a good paid tenant.
Yeah. So
important.
Look, Beatrice, it's my pleasure. If I'm so diverse in terms of my legal experience. So if there's any other topic I could assist you in the community,
I definitely will be calling on you.
Okay.
So
I had fun tonight. I
did too. I appreciate, because we're giving great information, and so we definitely want to thank our partners. We want to thank One Show PAM. I'm sure that's where you tune in and watching. We want to thank our partner, the Haitian Lawyers Association, the law offices of Cazot and Associates. Again, my name is Beatrice Cazot. You tuned in to Kozelegal. We appreciate that. Please share the live show. And you wanted to add something?
I want to say, we parle Creole.
That's important.
Si vous voulez parler Creole avec vous, comprendre nous. So
Yes.
vous mettez
Some of the terms tonight, we didn't know how to translate that, so we decided we're going to have it in English.
Yeah.
So, encore, non, monsieur Maître Béatrice Cazot, dans cabinet Cazot and Associates, nous dans région Banclan, 633 Northeast 167th Street, suite number 1025 dans North Miami Beach. Téléphone nous c'est 305-614-0702, 305-614-0702. My name is Beatrice Cazot with the Cazot and Associates. We are in the Regents Bank building at 633 Northeast 167th Street, suite number 1025 in North Miami Beach. Our telephone number here is 305-614-0702, 305-614-0702. Thank you for tuning in and watching Kozelegal. We'll be back next week with a new topic, new show, and possibly a new guest. So please tune in every Monday at 5 on One Show PAM, and we also stream it live on Kozelegal Facebook page. Thank you, everyone. Again, if you have a topic or a show that you'd like us to discuss on Kozelegal, send us an email. Our email is info@kozelegal.com, info@kozelegal.com. Our office number again is 305-614-0702. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. So like our like our pages, and follow us. You gotta remember all these terms. Follow and like. Thank you. À la prochaine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're appreciated.